Hey, welcome to the shop. This video tells the story of how the first Honda Goldwing came into existence. It's a tale of visionary leadership, under which talented people were inspired to explore the limits of the possible on a quest to design the ultimate motorcycle. This multi-year journey culminated in the birth of the 1975 Honda Goldwing, a machine that changed the motorcycling world, and today, nearly 5 decades later, has upheld a legacy as a reliable, capable, long-distance touring bike without equal. The early 1970s were heady times at Honda. By then, the company was the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer and a growing car maker with the resources to explore new ideas without limits. Founder Soichiro Honda was soon to retire, but his vision for innovation and his engineering philosophy were firmly embedded in the culture of the company, leading to revolutionary products like the Honda Civic and the CB754, which Honda called the king of motorcycles. And the king it was. The 754 was launched in 1969 into a market dominated by European and American bikes that were known for being any variety of leaky, shaky, unreliable, or expensive. The 754 was an affordable, powerful, smooth big bike that quickly established a reputation for reliability. It's fair to say the CB750 set the direction of street bike evolution in the coming decade and beyond. But in 1972, Kawasaki rolled out the Z1 900, which raised the bar once again and toppled the CB750 from its throne. Honda, never known for standing still, recognized the need to shift into a higher gear. Because Honda called the CB750 the king of motorcycles, and because this next bike would succeed the 750 as the company's flagship, the future Goldwing became known internally as the King of Kings. To rule a high-displacement segment that included fast bikes like the Z1, touring bikes like Harley-Davidson's, and European bikes that were a little of both, Honda's leaders wanted their king to be a superbike and a long-distance grand tourer. After all, motorcycle manufacturers of the time believed a GT and a superbike were one and the same. A big engine on wheels. The more displacement, the better. Motorcycle touring was an abstract notion in Japan at the time. But in the US, their primary target market, more and more people were riding their bikes long distances. Even so, many at Honda argued that focusing too heavily on the small touring segment was risky. And they had a second eye on the European market, where sportiness and performance had priority over comfort. The touring bike market of the early 1970s was a shallow pool. Harley-Davidson offered the popular Electroglide, which was a competent tourer, although it had excessive vibration and needed high maintenance. In 1973, BMW began selling the 900cc R90S, which was smoother and more reliable than the Harley, although it was expensive. Moto Guzzi offered worthy competition with the 850 Eldorado and the 750 Ambassador, but those were also expensive. With such a scant selection of affordable, purpose-built touring bikes, many long-haul riders were strapping luggage onto their CB750s and Kawi Z1s because, even though they weren't designed for touring, they were reliable and had the power to carry a heavy load. Honda had learned by then that their best strategy was to avoid arms races with other manufacturers. They had the most success when innovating to expand narrow market segments or create new ones. They could see that no manufacturer was delivering what long-distance tourers really wanted: more power, more comfort, protection from the elements, luggage, low maintenance, and reliability. So, rather than design a scaled-up CB750 for the sole purpose of outrunning the Z1, Honda set out to make a GT superbike by exploring the limits of how big and powerful a motorcycle could be. But beating Harley-Davidson at the game of building a big, fuel-hungry machine seemed out of place at Honda. In 1972, Honda unveiled its CBCC automotive engine technology which could meet the pending 1975 emissions requirements of the U.S. Clean Air Act, kneecapping American car makers whose lobbyists said doing so wasn't possible. The team making Honda's new flagship would have to swim against this corporate culture of designing for economy and instead push the limits on the amount of power and technology they could squeeze between two wheels. In Wako, Japan, in late 1972, Honda assembled a small group of engineers and designers, led by Shoichiro Irimajiri, to explore the art of the possible for their next flagship. This initiative was given the codename Project 371. Irimajiri was an iconic figure whose accomplishments included designing V12 Formula One engines and the legendary high-revving 5- and 6-cylinder Honda motorcycle racing engines of the 1960s. In the future, he would lead the creation of the CBX1000 and the CX500. He'd head up Honda R&D and eventually become the president of Honda America Inc. Irimajiri said Honda R&D was to him like Disneyland. They were encouraged to explore out-of-the-box ideas, and they were given the resources to turn those ideas into reality, often without knowing where they would lead. To explore the possible, Irimajiri's team developed the M1 prototype. It was a rolling laboratory for trying new ideas, but it was never intended to be a production prototype. The M1 was a departure from anything Honda had built so far. It had a liquid-cooled 6-cylinder boxer engine with a displacement of 1470 cc's, almost double that of the CB750's 736 cc's. The boxer configuration was chosen due to its inherent mechanical balance and its suitability for shaft drive, because Honda wanted their Grand Tourer to dispense with the maintenance and mess of chain drives. As a bonus, the flat engine gave the bike a lower center of gravity, something such a heavy machine would need. That low center of gravity would become a signature trait of all future Goldwings. The M1's single overhead camshafts were driven by rubber belts. The AC generator and clutch shaft rotated counter to the crankshaft to reduce rocking torque, which plagued other boxer engine bikes. The M1 had a wheelbase of 1480 millimeters and a weight of 210 kilograms. Mr. Honda himself wasn't initially a fan of the M1 concept. He said it looks like a bat, and he felt that 750 cc's was the biggest bike they could sell in numbers. He also believed that liquid cooling systems were too complex and heavy for motorcycles. One night, Mr. Honda, known for his surprises, commandeered the M1 and took it for a ride. This terrified the design team because they didn't think it was ready for him to test. By the time he brought it back, he was impressed by its smoothness, power, and ease of handling. It's not clear whether that ride converted him into a fan of the Goldwing concept, because the latter stages of the project happened after he retired in 1973. As for how they should use such a large engine, two camps emerged on the design team. Some believed top speed should be the priority, to outrun Kawasaki's Z1. Others wanted a grand touring engine with smooth power delivery and ample torque to haul a heavy load uphill without shifting gears. Although the grand touring camp won out, the M1's engine made 80 horsepower and it had a top speed of 220 kilometers per hour, making it slightly faster than the Z1. Honda was mainly focused on developing the engine at this time, so the M1's gearbox, shaft drive, mufflers, and brakes were taken from a BMW R75. Early on, the M1 had a CB750 front end. Project 371 was the first time Honda formally combined their proven abilities in motorcycle design with their expertise in automotive engineering. And in many ways, the M1 was built like a car. It had a single-disc dry clutch, and the Boxer 6 was reminiscent of Porsche engines, with an automotive-looking ignition distributor and one 2-barrel carburetor. Although the GL1000 would only be available in naked form, the M1 team experimented with hard saddlebags similar to those offered on Harley's Electroglides of the era. The M1 concept had its downsides. The engine and gearbox were too long to allow for comfortable upright riding like the designers wanted, and although the Boxer 6 was low, its width limited the bike's lean angle. Added to that, the engine's complexity and size would be a stretch for Honda's production capabilities of the time. The M1 had been a useful test bed, but it was never intended to be the final product, and Honda later moved on to designing a production prototype. The M1 still resides at Honda R&D. In 1984, they squeezed its engine into a GL1000 frame to weigh the merits of a 6 versus 4-cylinder engine in what would become the 1988 6-cylinder GL1500. In ways, the M1 was the first Goldwing. Its smooth, torquey, liquid-cooled boxer engine and shaft drive would be defining characteristics of all future Goldwings. Any prototype that's still recognizable after 50 years has to be considered a landmark. The team assembled to design the production prototype was led by Toshio Nozoe at Honda's Osaka R&D Center. Where Air Majiri had experience in designing engines, Nozoe's engineering background was that of chassis and frame designer, but his success in leading projects such as the CB450, CB750, and 250 Elsinore made him worthy to pick up where Irimajiri left off. Unlike Irimajiri, many of the engineers on this new team hadn't spent time in Honda's racing program. They were, however, the hands-on type with production know-how who could build what they imagined, test it, and learn how to make it better, following the philosophy embedded in the company by Mr. Honda. It reportedly took more than a year to decide whether to use a 4 or 6-cylinder engine. They studied the designs of companies like Porsche and BMW, which had refined the Boxer concept, as well as Chevrolet's Flat 6 from its 1960s Corvair. In the end, a 999cc Boxer 4 won out because it was shorter, smaller, and simpler than the 6. The designers stuck with liquid cooling because the reliability and high performance they were seeking meant the engine couldn't tolerate the wide variation in operating temperatures and internal clearances that air-cooled engines experience. Liquid cooling wasn't new to production motorcycles by then, although it hadn't been done on a bike with a 4-stroke or a Boxer engine. Showing its automotive DNA, the engine's cylinders were cast as one piece with the crankcase, instead of the bolt-on cylinders normally used on bike engines. It had floating piston pins and hemispherical combustion chambers, each with a 38mm intake valve and a 32mm exhaust valve. Like the M1's engine, the Flat 4 had single overhead cams and a counter-rotating gear-driven generator. The rubber timing belts were identical to those used in Honda Civics at the time. Instead of the M1's single carburetor, the designers opted for 4 Cayenne 32mm single-barrel carburetors. Placement of the carbs and air intake atop the cylinders was the main reason for choosing the underseat fuel tank. And because the tank would be lower than the carburetors, the GL would be the first production bike to have a fuel pump, which was driven off the right camshaft. Since their king was to rule the GT segment, the team wanted this engine to have more power than any of their BMW, Harley, or Moto Guzzi competitors. In the end, it produced 78 horsepower and 61.2 pounds-feet of torque, placing this GT engine well into superbike territory. To help deal with the length of the engine, the designers placed the 5-speed gearbox under the crankcase. They used the same multi-disc wet clutch and transmission, including gears and selectors, as were used in the CB750. These components might have been over-engineered for the 750, but the clutch was known to be one of the weaknesses of the early GL1000. The frame was a conventional steel tube, full duplex cradle with a 28-degree rake. It had 37mm front fork tubes, and the 2 rear shock absorbers with adjustable spring preload were common technology of the day. With the goal of making the ride as smooth as possible, the driveshaft had a shock absorber and the swing arm pivoted on roller bearings instead of bushings. The spoked wheels had aluminum alloy rims instead of pressed steel, as was common for the day. The 3.5x19 front tire and 4.5x17 rear were wider than those used on the M1. No suitable rear tire existed, so Honda reportedly spent $1 million early 1970s dollars to develop one. The dual-disc front brakes had floating single-piston calipers. The single-disc rear brake was a first for production bikes, and it had a dual opposing piston caliper. The front brake calipers were mounted behind the forks instead of in front, improving braking effectiveness and simplifying front wheel removal. The team had plenty of ideas to improve on the M1 concept, many of which didn't show up in the final product. Anti-lock braking was explored, but the technology of the day made it impractical. Fuel injection was considered, but deemed too complex for a touring machine that might need roadside maintenance. An automatic transmission like that of the future CB750A Honda Matic was abandoned to save weight, as was a hydraulic or electric center stand. Other production firsts did find their way to the end product. These included a second scavenging oil pump, an electric fuel gauge, and a buzzer that sounded when the turn signal was active. To make the prototype look more motorcycle-like, it had a false fuel tank up top, with doors that opened for storage and ease of maintenance. Another novel idea was the reserve lighting unit, which switched to a high beam headlamp or a brake lamp at reduced voltage to stand in for a failed low beam or taillight bulb. Of course, the King of Kings would have an electric starter, although a removable kickstart lever was stowed in the false tank. Another new idea from Honda in 1975 was to integrate the steering lock with the ignition switch. At 265 kg dry and 295 wet, this bike was very heavy. But in keeping with Honda's desire to build a user-friendly machine, the seat was a relatively low 810 millimeters. The prototype underwent intense torture testing in the field. They tested the bike in the blistering summer heat of the Australian outback, which led to raising the air intake higher under the false tank and further away from the airstream, leaving the radiator. Ever since, Goldwing's air filters have been located up high, beneath much plastic and other devices, making them a notorious amount of work to change. The shaft drive endured particularly harsh testing because Honda wanted it to be indestructible. Testers were breaking it almost daily with the so-called stomp test, where they'd run the bike up to 50 km per hour, shift into neutral, and then stomp it into first gear without using the clutch. Motorcycle magazine testers would later be surprised that they could easily smoke the GL1000's rear tire, a feat made possible by its big engine and beefy drivetrain. The team explored a wide range of styles. Reportedly, some designs had lines in common with the CB750, while others brought to mind the future Honda CX series. They tried a 4x4 exhaust, a variety of false tank and side cover shapes, different seats, mirrors, turn signals, and handlebars. The ultimate style was fairly conservative, with modest branding and minimal bling. The GL1000 took about 2 years from concept to production, 3 times Honda's typical 8 months for a new model. In all aspects, no corners were cut on quality. This was Honda's flagship to showcase their technical prowess, not an exercise in so-called value engineering. Honda had kept the GL1000 project a secret, but they had a reputation for coming up with big ideas, and everyone in the industry was anticipating their response to Kawasaki's Z1. There was speculation that it would be a Z1-eating monster, perhaps with an inline 4 scaled up from the CB750, or something radical like a V6, or a variant of the CVCC car engine. Honda put an end to the speculation in 1974. In September, their American dealers got a sneak peek at the Goldwing during their annual meeting in Las Vegas. The following month, what Honda called the ultimate motorcycle was unveiled to the public at the International Bicycle and Motorcycle Exhibition in Cologne, Germany. Honda's CB404 Supersport was also introduced at that show. The 1975 Goldwing was available in Candy Antares Red or Candy Blue Green. Although some early prototypes and demonstration units had fairings or hard saddlebags, the new GL1000 was only available in naked form. This seemed odd for a big mile-munching GT, and it wasn't intended to play out that way. Honda was planning to offer fairings of their own design as a Honda line add-on to be manufactured by the Vetter Fairing Company, which made fairings and touring accessories. Its founder, Craig Vetter, is an American industrial designer who had styled, among other things, the 1973 Triumph X75 Hurricane. Vetter's Windjammer fiberglass fairing was introduced in 1972 and within 2 years had sold more than 35,000 units in the blossoming big bike market. Honda invited Craig Vetter to Japan in August of 1974 to view their fairing, although they wouldn't show him the motorcycle it was to fit. He first saw the fairing on the bike a month later at the Las Vegas dealer meeting. He told Honda their fairing was too small for such a large bike, advising that a bigger design like the Windjammer would have more appeal in the US market. But Honda stood their ground, so Vetter agreed to manufacture their version. Because Vetter was working directly with Honda, they had their own Windjammer fairings and brackets ready to fit the Goldwing before dealers got their first GLs. This was fortunate for Vetter because a fire in their plant ruined the molds for the Honda fairings, causing a production setback, while the Windjammers were a hit with GL owners. It came to a point where most buyers wouldn't take delivery of their new GL until it was fitted with a Windjammer. By 1978, Vetter sold color-matched fairings and saddlebags using Honda's paint formulas. Vetter doubled production every year in that era as they and other companies expanded their lines to meet growing demand. This booming aftermarket wasn't lost on Honda, and it was only a matter of time before Goldwings would ship from the factory with fairings installed. Honda quietly ended its collaboration with Vetter, and he sold his company in 1978. Sure enough, the 1980 GL1000 Interstate came with its own Windjammer-like fairing. The GL1000 was the first Japanese bike to do battle with Harleys and the big European bikes on their home turf. It wasn't the cheapest in the field, but it was competitively priced. Honda claimed the GL1000 had a top speed of 201 km per hour and could do a quarter mile in the high 12-second range. Although big and heavy, it was still among the fastest in the market. However, the GL shone in its own way, by setting a new standard for smooth, quiet performance with ample torque across its rev range. The Z1 was built purely for speed, and it could easily sprint to over 100 miles per hour, while the GL was made to run a marathon at 100 miles per hour, day after day after day. To show how smooth the flat 4 ran, Honda marketers borrowed a gimmick from Rolls-Royce by standing a nickel on the cam belt cover and running the engine to show that the nickel stayed put. The Goldwing oozed refinement and quality with a modest exhaust note, a comfortable, quiet ride, and impeccable fit and finish. This was Honda's flagship, after all. Honda was hoping for an immediate hit like they had with the CB750, but GL sales fell well below expectations. Although 80% went to the US, their primary target market for this bike. Because the speculation about it had varied so widely, it's no surprise that the Goldwing got a mixed reaction. It looked different than any other bike, and many people didn't know what to think of it. Some said it looked like a sideshow freak, an aberration born of a motorcycle and a car. Most people couldn't see where this bike slotted into the market. It had the power, speed, and exhilaration of a superbike, but it was big and heavy with high handlebars and a limited lean angle, so it wasn't seen as a Z1 killer. Nor was it sporty in the eyes of European riders accustomed to the lighter, more compact BMWs, Guzzis, or Ducatis. And because it only came in naked form, most people didn't recognize the GL1000 as a touring machine. Some felt that Honda had tried to make a bike to suit everyone, but they had actually tailored it to a small market niche, somewhat accidentally, since they and other manufacturers didn't really understand that niche at the time. Nor did the market seem ready for this new bike, setting up a classic chicken and egg situation. Then people started to see how the GL1000 could comfortably and reliably carry them long distances, and the niche grew beyond the hardcore tourers who were toughing it out on Harleys, European, or smaller Japanese bikes. The Goldwing had as much to do with creating its own market as the other way around. The GL1000's critics did have their valid points. The seat was typical of a mid-1970s Honda, meaning it wasn't made for long-distance comfort. The clutch was a known weakness, as were the spoked wheels, with Honda switching to Comstar alloys in 1978. Because the Goldwing was big and heavy and didn't look like a sport bike, people expected it to be hard to maneuver in parking lots, with the road handling and stopping performance of a loaded dump truck. But those who rode it appreciated the agility afforded by its low center of gravity, the thrill of its smooth, always available torque, and its surprisingly strong brakes. Like Mr. Honda discovered about the M1, and like it's been said about every Goldwing made since, you have to ride one to understand how good they are. Testers did, however, find the GL's limitations in aggressive cornering. Its tube frame was strong, but it could still flex under the bike's immense weight. This was compounded by limited ground clearance, inadequate suspension damping, the rear tire's high, flexible sidewalls, and the absence of tapered steering head bearings prior to 1978. For what was to be a showcase of technology, the Goldwing's standout features weren't really new. Boxer engines were common. Suzuki's GT750 had liquid cooling since 1971, while Moto Guzzi, BMW, and others were already selling shaft-driven bikes. However, the GL was the first production motorcycle to put all of these technologies together in one package. Cycle magazine called the GL1000 the gentleman's choice. Honda had spent so much time building quality into every part that it exuded a level of refinement unseen in other bikes of the day. It had an understated exhaust note and a quiet engine thanks to the rubber timing belts. Many people didn't recognize the benefit of such refinement, but those riding long distances could see it clearly. In general, magazine reviewers had mixed opinions about the GL1000. On the positive side, Motorcyclist magazine called it pioneering and a touring masterpiece. Motorcycle News said it was a superb example of engineering. And Cycle magazine wrote, "If Honda is going to sell a motorcycle for $3,000, then by all that's holy, it's going to be worth it." Not so positive reviews came from publications like Two Wheels, which said the GL1000 was bulbous and ostentatious. And Bike magazine described it as an ugly, overweight, complicated two-wheeled car. Likening the Goldwing to a car wasn't really a criticism, because what made it seem like a car was also what made it a good grand tourer. Its low maintenance, strong frame, and powerful engine meant it could easily carry 2 passengers, fairings, saddlebags, and anything else they could strap or bolt on over long distances without breaking down or springing leaks. Craig Vetter said GL owners were the first group of riders who didn't have to fill their bags with tools. That reputation broadened the market by appealing to the less mechanically inclined folks who wanted to ride long distances. There were rumors that Honda would discontinue the Goldwing after its dismal first-year sales. Thankfully, they had the patience to wait for the fruit of the seeds they had sown. By the end of its run in 1979, 97,000 GL1000s were sold in the US alone. It's no surprise that the GL1000 was one of the 75 bikes selected for the Guggenheim Museum's Art of the Motorcycle exhibit in the late 1990s. Its distinct, groundbreaking design marked a milestone in the evolution of motorcycles and motorcycling. Throughout history, the most successful innovations have been those that opened the world's eyes to new possibilities. Ford's Model T made cars affordable for the masses. IBM's Model 5150 PC made it commonplace to have a computer in the home. And the Goldwing made long-distance, stress-free motorcycle touring accessible to tens of thousands worldwide. Although most of the GL1000's technology wasn't the first in the market, aspects of its design philosophy and many of its features have since become commonplace. The M1 was a product of a sharp focus on centralizing mass and lowering the center of gravity, common practices today. And it wasn't long before most other bikes had fuel gauges, rear disc brakes, and front brake calipers mounted behind the forks. Just as the CB750 started the trend of the universal Japanese motorcycle, the GL1000 marked the beginning of its end. Focusing on a narrow market segment became the industry norm, as new niches were created in segments such as sport bikes, adventure bikes, and so many more. The quality built into every part of the Goldwing gave it the feel of an upmarket brand, such as Acura or Lexus today. This slot of premium motorcycle in the market was arguably empty since Brough Superiors and Vincents were discontinued in the 1940s and 1950s. By occupying that spot, the GL appealed to people who could afford luxury and until then hadn't seen themselves as motorcyclists. It wasn't long before the GL had a cult-like following, with clubs such as the Goldwing Road Riders Association and the Goldwing European Federation forming around the world. Importantly, Honda sought and listened to the feedback of these customers, which had a strong influence on refinements to future Goldwings and made owners loyal to the marque. It's fair to say that the owners of those early GLs made it into the touring bike it became. Opinions on the Goldwing remain polarized today, just as they were in 1974. But no matter where you are on that spectrum, you'd have to agree that very few motorcycles can boast a legacy like that left by the GL1000. Although Honda's journey from inspiring vision to production bike was a long one, taking the time to get it right in those early days continues to pay dividends. Unlike so many motorcycles introduced in the 1970s, an era turbulent with game-changing ideas, the Goldwing has endured. Now, almost 5 decades after it was coined, Goldwing is practically a household name among motorcyclists. And over those decades, as Honda's flagship, it has been the standard against which all other touring bikes have been measured. It truly has reigned as the King of Kings. Thanks for watching.